Hi. Funny to see you here. Don't mind me, I'm just baking a cake, that's all. Think of this as a new approach to reviewing games. All will become clear soon enough. Anyway, I've got all my ingredients right here. Sugar, butter, eggs, powder, more powder, flour, cocoa, milk, and the games I'm covering. Analogue, A Hate Story, and Hate Plus, two visual novels by Canadian writer Christine Love. So, get your bowl, combine the sugar with the butter, mix that shit. So, Christine Love first came to prominence in 2010 with the excellent Digital A Love Story, a game set 5 minutes into the future of 1988. In said game, you play as a teenager who's just got a computer and the power to access bulletin boards, thus setting the scene for a wonderful tale about going online, being a script kiddie, hacking, getting friendly with computer AIs. It's a fine game, with a very authentic feel. The actual processes involved in scouring this old internet come into play throughout the game's puzzles, and, well, it's an Amiga 500, isn't it? As soon as I booted the game up, I saw Workbench 1.3 and I knew immediately that I was in for a damn good time. But more than anything else, it's a wonderful, uniquely written story. This isn't the nonsense you might expect from the visual novel genre. It's a game that surprises you at every end, and one that's really worth playing, like, now, especially seeing as it's free. It's the sort of universe you'd want to stick around in. And indeed, fans got their wish when Analogue, A Hate Story came out in 2012. Even if it is set thousands of years into the future, in the darkest recesses of space, based around a large Korean ship that's been floating around aimlessly for hundreds of years, the cyber love story theme is still very much intact, but the game, well, that's so much more. Okay, so we've been mixing for a while now, and I think this is just about the right consistency. So, yeah. Phew. Anyway, Analogue, A Hate Story was kind of a big deal, as opposed to being released into a small, closely knit community where, frankly, outsiders fear to tread. It would be released on Steam for the whole world to see. It would be many people's first experience of a visual novel. To be honest, even the very act of releasing the game on Steam itself signified a bit of acceptance for a genre that's usually roundly mocked. So yes, as I was saying, I reckon this mixture is just about the right consistency now, so we'll just leave it to one side. And so yeah, one might wonder what makes Analogue so special. Maybe it's different to the visual novel that becomes famous by being completely unlike all other visual novels. But, you know, the answer to that is, of course, a very resounding hell no. Now, let's beat some eggs. Shit. Like Digital, Analogue uses a mock computer terminal as its interface, only now it's the future, so we can use AI constructs and visual representations. And so the first thing you see when you get into the systems of the Magungwa, the aforementioned Korean ghost ship, is an anime girl. Now that's the sort of thing you might be afraid of, isn't it? The very sight of an anime girl might cause some people to immediately abandon all interest. Well, my advice to you is simple. Don't let it. That is all. If you do, you will be missing out. Anyhow, this particular girl is Hyune, and she's a computer program. And you're the first person who's loaded her up in like 600 years, so naturally she's going to be quite welcoming and more than ready to help you uncover the mystery of what happened to the ship. And what you find is quite interesting. A huge generational spaceship whose values were based off of medieval Korean history. Meaning, for instance, that the ship had an imperial family. The noblemen held prestigious positions on the ship, everyone dresses modestly, everybody respects their elders, and the women, well, the women existed. So long as they bared sons, that is. Ideally, they shouldn't even be able to write. Early on in the game, Hyune shows you a two-word Korean phrase, namchon yobe. Hyune translates this phrase to, men are honoured, women are abased. Other translations run along the same lines, respect men, lower women. The phrase is in fact sort of a Korean cliché, at least it was, and it is one of the core foundations of the whole game. You have an imperial society operating on a futuristic ship, so you know, where did the inspiration come from? Christine Love found it in the Joseon Dynasty, rulers of Korea for over 500 years, from the 14th through to the 19th century. And yes, there is a history lesson on the way. Take notes, for there will be a quiz. So then, Joseon. First off, the Joseon Dynasty was reactionary even for the 14th century. They condemned the Koryo dynasty they replaced as depraved and suppressed the more modern Buddhist teachings of the time in favour of the works of Confucius, creating a sort of neo-Confucianism that focused, in the main, on the idea of filial piety, respecting your elders, and strict societal roles, knowing your place. There's a somewhat large gap between the social orders. Women, even noble women, being amongst the lower classes. In the context of this work in particular, the main duty of a wife is simply to give birth and continue the line. In most cases they weren't even included in family trees, and education, as we define it, was not a priority. Indeed, it would be frowned upon. A lot of the historical angles Christine Love takes in Analogue are not actually embellished or exaggerated. If anything, when you look at the dynasty itself, they're underplayed. And it's also actually still a fairly relevant subject in this day and age. The Joseon Dynasty only ended a little over 100 years ago, and a lot of those traditions still exist in Korea, alongside a society that is actually still, to this day, really quite sexist. In 2010, a study was released revealing that Korean women were paid, on average, 39% less than men in similar positions, the largest gap in the whole study, and a whole 10% more than the second-placed country, Japan. So if you're looking for some good academia, or just reasons behind the occasionally weird attitudes towards the genders in Asia, the continuing influence of Confucianism is probably a good place to start. Anyway, sidetrack over. Let's get back to what's really important. Okay, so I've beaten the eggs, and now we're ready to add them to our mixture. Now make sure that when you do this, you do it gradually. So now we're going to add flour, cocoa and baking powder with the help of good old Susie Sieve. Okay, so let's do it. And now we fold it in gently. You don't want to be too rough with it, you don't want any air bubbles or anything like that. So what can we take from all that history? Well, Christine Love certainly did her research to a damn high standard and all. It really places you right into the heart of this big ghost spaceship and draws you further in when the story becomes personal, and particularly when Hyunei is revealed as something more than just a AI that's keeping dead records. You come to the ship looking for old historical data and, well, you find something so much more. Maybe even a friend? I don't know. Anyway, I think this folding's done. Right, I'm gonna go grease some baking tins, and you're gonna go back to the game world. Your own personal relationship with Hyunei certainly becomes a factor as the game progresses. She is after all in control of the logs and the only one who can help you find context, so you know, make of that what you will. However, you will stumble upon a second AI, Mute, the ship's security program. She has her own interpretations of the story, and so, you know, minor spoilers ahead. It turns out that Hyunei is actually a sick girl who was placed into a cryogenic chamber thousands of years ago in the hope that she could be treated in the future, a future that, alas, refused to improve. So she grew up for the first 14 or so years of her life in a wholly different, progressive society, and so when she was released into the imperial society, she didn't exactly fit in, and 'twas a combination that would ultimately lead to disaster. Mute, on the other hand, has views shaped by the dynasty, and as such they are much more in line with those values we just talked about. She's utterly misogynistic and values filial piety above all. And she also has her own views on Hyunei herself, and that's partly where the hate of the title comes in. Mute's hatred of Hyunei and Hyunei's hatred for the society. It's hard to explain it all without just spoiling everything, unfortunately. You just have to play it for yourself, but you certainly get into the history, the story, and all of its shocking details. Just a quick example, I guess. There's a moment in the story where the ship starts to go haywire. It's suddenly active after laying dormant for hundreds of years, and it just can't take it, Captain. You have to go into the system and manage the power so it doesn't blow up, taking you with it. It's a pretty simple puzzle that you're given about 20 minutes to solve, and you could easily do it in 3, possibly 5 the first time through. Well, when I first played through the game, I finished the puzzle with around about 2 minutes to go. It was more than just joining dots, it was a damn tough thing to do, and I'll leave it to you to wonder why that was. It's a masterful moment, one of the most gripping and intense I have ever encountered in such a game, matched only by, well, other moments in this story, particularly all of the crushing resolutions as you go through the logs. Because in the end, well, this isn't a happy journey. Some of the logs are actually incredibly hard to read, a testament to Love's power as a writer. And you come away at the end with a fairly complex relationship between yourself and, well, a fictional character. Kind of hard to explain and probably not for everyone. You know, it's not that silly sort of thing, you know, the my waifu type stuff. But you just feel as though you've shared a moment with somebody. You might have sympathy, you might understand, or you might not even. Some actions can be, on the face of them, hard to forgive. But it's definitely worth taking that journey. In short, I would recommend Analogue as a fantastic game. Praise it to the high heavens, as high as possible. I've played it many times just to experience the story from all sides and reach all the endings, and I was never not completely engrossed in it, looking through logs again and again, finding details that I looked over one time but then suddenly I caught them the next. It's wonderful, honestly brilliant. Even if you don't think you would like this sort of thing, I seriously recommend you give it a whirl. So yes, that's Analogue. Right, so of course we've got our greased tins, all greased and nicely lined with butter, so the next step, stick the mixture in there. Let's do it. Just, you know, put it all in and make sure, after you've done that, that it's all nice and evenly spread out. So, you've got your cake mix in the 2 tins, you've got your oven preheated. All that's left to do is stick that bun into the oven. Yeah, slam it in, slap it, and tap it. Whew. Right, okay, so that's now going to bake for around about 20 minutes and hopefully it will rise majestically. In the meantime, let's take a break. Sue, you're great, you know. Look, I know you're more cherchez la femme and all that, but still, we should go into the countryside and eat some scones together. I mean, we could be friends at least, right? Oh, there you are. Anyway, Analogue left one burning question in the mind. We know that Hyunei grew up in a progressive society that we would perhaps recognise as more akin to one of our own, and she was then thrown into a regressive imperial society. And the big question was, how did all that happen? Just, you know, what happened in between? And Christine Love promised the answers, and she would deliver them in the shape of Hate Plus, a 2013 sequel to Analogue that was originally going to be an expansion, but then later grew into a full game. It should be said immediately that there's not much point in playing Hate Plus if you haven't already played Analogue. It's meant to fill in all those big gaps after all. You can even take saves from Analogue and transfer them to this game. It's probably not spoiling too much to say that at the end of Analogue, you decide if you want to take the AI with you back to Earth or not, and depending on what you do it can be Hyunei, or Mute, or even, if you cheat, both. Either way, as you begin your journey back, the AI finds log files in their memory from before the Year Zero, the event that led to the Imperial Dynasty's formation, and they reckon it'd be nice to read them together. I mean, what, don't you agree? One thing that's interesting here is how the story is told. You can only extract a few files at a time, and your ship has limited power. When you don't have any power, you actually have to shut down for a day before you can extract files again. And that's real time. The story takes place over 3 real-time days, covering your journey back to Earth. You actually do have to stop playing and just let the story sit for a time. It's an odd approach, but it works. If the game didn't have it, you could probably plough through the whole thing in a couple of hours without even really taking it in. But with the enforced delay, you do find yourself thinking a great deal about the story and the characters and the log files you've read in the downtime. All the new people, the differences between the mute you know and the mute you find in the old logs, how Hyunai reacts to some of the more intimate details, and who keeps benefiting from all the conspiring and power plays that are clearly going on, the strings behind the strings, so to speak. And of course, going through these logs continues to build your relationship with the character, something that I've barely even touched on yet, to be honest. You see, one of the main conceits of the game is that you can't properly talk to them. They have to ask you binary questions to which you can respond in ways that they've chosen. Occasionally these are positive and negative and not necessarily symbolic, but there are amusing points where you might feel somewhat railroaded into a choice. Not because of bad game design, you understand, but because of the AI itself. The choices are kind of like what the AI presumes you would say and what they'd like you to say, especially when it comes to Hyunai. The relationships also change dramatically depending on whether you choose to be male or female, the difference being a lot more marked if mute's your companion, thanks to those ancient values we mentioned before. And it all plays into what the game has to say about relationships, sex, gender identity, so much to go into. We'll try and delve into it a little more. But first... Right, now obviously it's no use just having 2 layers of cake and nothing else. If you really want a good chocolate cake, you know, you've got to sex it up a bit. And you know what that means? Icing. So we have some pieces of dark chocolate melting in a bowl over a pan of simmering water. Again, you know, you don't want to be too rough, you don't want to boil the shit out of it. I mean, this is expensive 85% cocoa here, so, you know, treat it with respect. Cakes are... looking good. Need a little bit more time though, so let's do that. And we've also got some double cream. Now, I know what you're thinking, you know, you don't want it to be too heavy, you don't want it to be too fattening, but look, you know, as far as I can see, you know, it's fucking chocolate cake, so the diet's already a shit show. What I say is, go big, or go home. So, the chocolate has melted. So we're going to take it off the heat, and what we're going to do now is we are going to add the double cream. We want to be kind of careful with this, we don't want it to curdle or anything. And then we are going to stir. And then after we stir it and it's all done, we're just going to leave it on the side to thicken and cool. And I suppose that the question you may be asking yourself right now is, why the hell am I doing all of this? One of the really fun things about these games is how they play with what you'd traditionally expect. Going all the way back to digital, the main thing there was that all you could do was press reply. You never actually saw your own messages, meaning that the story concentrated on who you were talking to as opposed to the protagonist. Analogue uses a similar approach, but with a little more control over your protagonist, as well as featuring the command line puzzle already mentioned. Hate Plus, well, it asks you to bake a cake. And hell, why not? It's Hyunai's way of relaxing. It's not like the story's going to have a happy ending, so you may as well have some cake and be merry, huh? Now you might not take it seriously at first, but then you realise that, damn it, the game means it. You don't actually have to bake a cake in order to advance, but the game will certainly guilt trip you into making an effort, especially if you try to lie about it. It's certainly a cute little fourth wall breaker, that's for sure. And hey, you know, why not? Nothing wrong with it, is there? All I'm doing is making a cake for a cool person, who doesn't exist. Look, don't fucking judge me, okay? I'm not the only one. There's achievements at stake here. And if I send this into the folks at the Great British Bake Off, I'll be on TV, and I'll be famous, and I'll be ever so much closer to greatness. Never mind. Anyway, the cake should be just about done by now, so I reckon we should take it out the oven. You might want to give it a little jab with your finger. and if it springs back up, which I believe it is doing, you've got cake. So, all we can do now is leave them to cool, and while that's happening, well, I think I'll do my level best to just sum these two games up as good as I can. Paired together, these two games, Analogue and Hate Plus, seem to cover a veritable smorgasbord of themes. They have a very non-linear nature. You pick the logs you want to read, gradually piecing together a puzzle. 1 minute you're reading the dry minutes of a council session, the next you're wrapped up in a romantic account of an affair between two lovers. It's impossible to pigeonhole it. I couldn't even say that the story was wholly masculine or feminine. What does it warn against, if anything? Not sure, but quite possibly repression. That seemed to click for me on my last one of 3 through Hate Plus, rereading again the story of the one person who is responsible for the transformation of the Magungwa, an obsessive, almost Knights Templar-esque character who purposefully manipulates their way into recreating a new Joseon Dynasty. Frankly, the person you would probably expect to hate most of all, who comes, in the author's words, from an incredibly dark place. But in the end, though, well, the only identifiable emotions are just pity and sorrow. And that's quite common, to be honest. Very few characters in the game are wholly good or do what you would want them to do. The story never seems to quite turn out okay. The hero never gets the girl or the boy. There's no picturesque sunset for the ride home. Just a steady stream of little endings. Good? Bad? Well, they're just endings. Christine Loves Games also communicate through the wonders of exploration. I mean, in the end, it's all history, isn't it? The documents are all ancient in the game's universe, simply historical curiosities for most people. But, well, they do still mean something for someone, and in the end, they mean something to you too. And that one purpose, you know, the exploration, all things considered, when you look at the way I suppose it deals with sexual issues and such, that exploration theme kinda seems apt, I reckon. So, all that's left is the icing. So, what we're going to do is we're going to take our icing and spread it, try and spread it evenly on the top. So, we've got one half of the cake all creamy, and so now we need to put them both together. So, get the other half of the cake, and just make sure that evenly spin it in, and contact! Okay, just press it down, and there you go. I now pronounce you cake and cake. Just a little bit more icing now that we've just saved for the top. And there you have it. Kimble's chocolate cake. Now please, sit your ass down and enjoy some gratuitous food porn shots. I'll just reiterate what I said previously. Don't just dismiss these games because they're visual novels, or because there's anime stylings involved, because there's so much more than that. Just, I don't know, treat them as if you would a good book. Just settle yourself down and get ready for a good story. And hey, you know what? A few glasses of booze, they probably wouldn't go amiss either. Anyway, there's not much left to say except... let's eat. Here you go, Hyunei. My waifu. You know, shame never tasted so good. Anyway, it's about time to end the video. So thank you for watching, and wherever you are, whoever you be, have a good one, take care, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.